What do you do if you are living somewhere that is high risk? Now, whether that is bushfire, whether it's flood from rivers, from lakes, whether it's on the beach, what do you do? I know a lot of people who, have a house on a creek or a river and the insurance is through the roof. We've just been through hell with the Townsville floods. A lot of people up there, John. We did that live show up there last year. Real people with real homes, and there's legitimately real crises happening. You look further abroad, the LA fires, and, the insurance companies pulled out well before these fires ripped through. And I don't know if we're going to have all the solutions today, but I just want to talk about, because a lot of people live in these places and it's getting to the stage where it's unaffordable. I just want to acknowledge this whole crisis and flood thing. Like, Townsville was underwater a few years ago. It was Lismore's turn. A few years before that, we had the fires through South Coast? Like the really bad fires.
Yeah, Victoria's had a heap of it. Grampians.
Like, this is getting quite rough. And, I know someone who lives on Tuggerah Lake, and the insurance, like, it flooded 3 times in 3 years, and it was like $8,000 a year for home insurance. I mean, what do we do? I mean, it's probably a bigger issue that governments, state and federal, they need to do something about this. I don't know the answer. I think just before Christmas, Mornington Peninsula, full houses slid down a hill. And we know that insurance is good, but I don't know if it's worth paying $7,000-8,000 a year, even if you can get insurance. I mean, you look at the LA fires, and the problem with insurance now, everyone, with this international reinsurers, so companies that insure the insurance companies, they're looking at worldwide data.
Yeah.
And they're just pulling out of markets. So without being kind of insensitive to people, and we've had listeners and people in the Facebook group that have lost everything, it's a real issue when it comes to a house. And, do we buy there? Do we just rent? And I don't know, I guess with an educational hat on, John, what do you say to people who might call you and say, hey, John, I want to buy an investment property, for example, but I want to buy it in a quote-unquote risky place?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Townsville before, and obviously thoughts go out to those who are affected up there at present, because they had like 500 mil of rain within 3 days or something. It was like extreme. Like, it's unbelievable. So that's going to flood even unfloodable areas, isn't it? Like, with that sort of enormity. But we were up there doing that live event and talking to people on the ground. They had Cyclone Kirrily that came through like 12 months or 2 years ago. They're building houses now that cater for those sort of cyclone events, that because it's happened in the past and there's a fair chance it will continue to happen going forward. No one knows when they're going to hit, but they are risky. It is risky to go into those areas. There's no doubt about that. And sometimes price reflects that. Like, Townsville's had an amazing run of growth. Like, it's 2 years ago, median house price probably around $350,000, today around $550,000. So someone that's had their owner occupier up there or an investment has $200K in their wealth as a result of that. But is it worth it? And as you said, with insurance premiums, they're getting heavier and heavier each year, and they're critiquing more and more areas that potentially are not even in flood zones, but they're like, no, we're not even going to risk it because we've seen signs in other areas where it could happen. Like, I've just got a map here, and I don't know what camera I'm showing, but
don't bother trying.
But that's Townsville. Like, that blue is flood.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the whole city that's basically in a flood zone. So owners in the area would know that. and just say, okay, we know it's going to happen. We just have to cop the premiums, and because we want to live our life here.
But this is the crazy thing. Like, if the property value did grow by 200 grand, that's cute. I still need to fund $200 a week for building insurance.
That's right. And the hassle, the mental stress or load that it might put on the individual household owners when something like that comes through. Like, that's how often it happens, who knows?
Because I think I said when I was in Townsville at the live event, like, if I was living in one of these areas that were high risk, be it Townsville, anywhere up Rocky, like pretty much north of the Tropic of
Capricorn, yeah.
Like, I'm literally just renting and doing my wealth building elsewhere, because just purely with the money hat on, I don't want the disruption of getting flushed.
Yeah, and I'll probably be the same. One of our BAs actually grew up in Lismore, which is one of the worst affected in Australia for continual floods. And like that, they're to a point where insurers won't even go in there.
Oh, absolutely. And this is why it's a problem. And, you know, when I said, like, it's cute for me to say, oh, if I live there, I'll just rent. Like, we got the humanity and the emotions come in. We live in this area.
Yeah.
We don't want to leave. We want to buy.
Yeah.
At what point do you take a risk?
Everyone's risk profile is different, isn't it? To say, well, yeah, I know the worst case scenario. Like, I know a guy on Tuggerah Lakes here who's gone through 3 floods, and basically 3 renovations, 3 insurance claims.
Ben?
No, there's another guy that's like sort of Tuggeranong way. Well, like, they know that. I'm like, why don't you sell? He's like, I like this area. Like,
Yeah. Well, the people I know at Chittaway Point, 3 floods, 3 years.
Yeah.
Like, but people still live there. So we know that people want to live in these areas and it's their home. And I don't want to move from my area where I live.
No.
And I just don't know what the solution is. Because if your house burnt down or if it flooded and there was a total loss, like, it's just so devastating.
Yeah. And there's a risk to doing anything, isn't there? If as Australians, if we didn't buy houses in flood zones, most of the East Coast would be out of bounds. Like, when you look at southeast Queensland, a lot of it's in a flood zone. Look at Brisbane River. You look at all coastal areas; they're all in flood zones.
Brisbane flooded a few years ago. Like,
yeah, and there's an argument that was man-made,
Right.
like creation, because of holding water back and things like that. So it's like there's other parts that come into play as well. But yeah, that's the country we live in.
Yeah. So I don't know if we've got any answers, but I just want to say it's a conundrum, a quandary, if you will.
Well, and our biggest gauge when we're looking for investors is, what's the insurance policy? Is it $2,000 or 20? Like, if it's 20, we're not doing it. If it's 10, we're not doing it. It's 8 or 7 or 6, we're not doing it. That's probably your biggest litmus test, because the insurers are the ones getting the phone calls saying my house is flooded. Council maps and overlays and all those things come into play, but at the end of the day, the insurers.
Okay, so let's play this out. If I was a resident in said high-risk areas.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, I'll just use an example. Like, Central Coast where you live, okay, you don't pay an outrageous insurance policy for your house.
No.
You want to live in that area, but if that area was deemed risky for bushfires, like overnight, the ruling changed, the surveys or risky to flood, and then they said, look, there is a risk here. We're either pulling out of the area, like what happened in LA, and I use LA because these are global reinsurance companies.
Yeah.
Okay. Australia is such a small fish in the global insurance pond. So if an insurance company said to you, John, to live at your house, we want to now charge you $8,000 a year, what do you do? Because this is the human element. Do you move the family away, or do you cough up the money and live there? Or do you say, we'll take some risk and insure half of it, and half is $4,000 premium?
Yeah.
But if there is a major loss, we're still kind of screwed.
Yeah.
So my question is, hypothetically, what do you do if you wake up in a situation where you are a house owner in that area, or you've grown up there and you want to live in that area?
Yeah. And these are the conversations, the people in Lismore, the people in Townsville, the people in bushfire areas that have had bushfire go through their place. They're the conversations they're having. Like, when you put it that way, I'm looking at it saying, can I afford that? Because I don't want to move. I like the area I live. Right? I break it down per week. Okay, this is what we need to factor into our living costs and get on with our life, or find another insurer that goes cheaper. I don't know. But 99% of me would be saying I'm staying, which is probably what a lot of those people are doing.
But the money has to come from somewhere.
Has to come from somewhere. I think where you look at the cost of moving elsewhere as well, not only the physical dollar cost, but
The relational cost.
the whole, your whole life and what's impacted there as well. So, yeah, it's a tough one. But I don't think, and I suppose the reason for bringing this up is it's getting worse, not better.
Totally.
It's happening, the frequency of it is, and maybe it's because it's more socially, the knowledge is there quicker, and we hear more stories because of online, but it's definitely more prevalent than it used to be.
Yeah, having like 3,000-year floods in 3 years.
Yeah, well, they used to have the 1 in 100 year.
Yeah.
Like they're maybe gone now. Like a lot of contracts when you're buying real estate will say this may be in a flood zone, just to
Yeah, or
cater
do
for
you
it.
like be really strategic, and if there is value in the property, I don't love this, but I'm just thinking it's like, all right, if we can get a value that's more equity, we literally borrow the insurance premium. But then again, 10 years could be 100 grand.
Yeah.
Like,
I would never buy a house and not insure it.
no, but there's a lot of people that, they buy the house. You've got to show the bank the policy's current before they'll settle on it. There's probably a lot of people that just cancel the policy the next day.
I'm sure. And I'm sure that people in Lismore that are paying 20 grand a year would be using equity.
But yeah, I don't know the situation, but just an interesting talking point.